The Sultan and His Three Sons, from the 1001 Nights, translated from the Arabic by Sir Richard and Lady Isabel Burton. There was erewhile in the land of Al Yaman a man which was a Sultan, and under him were 3 kinglets whom he overruled. He had 4 children, to wit, 3 sons and a daughter. He also owned wealth and treasures greater than reed can pen or page may contain, as well as animals such as horses and camels, sheep and black cattle, and he was held in awe by all the sovereigns. But when his reign had lasted for a length of time, age brought with it ailments and infirmities, and he became incapable of faring forth his palace to the divan, the hall of audience. Whereupon he summoned his 3 sons to the presence, and said to them, As for me, 'tis my wish to divide among you all my substance ere I die, that ye may be equal in circumstance, and live in accordance with whatso I shall command. And they said, Hearkening and obedience. Then quoth the Sultan, Let the eldest of you become sovereign after me. Let the cadet succeed to my monies and treasures, and as for the youngest, let him inherit my animals of every kind. Suffer none to transgress against other, but each aid each and assist his co-partner. Then he caused them to sign a bond and agreement to abide by his bequeathal, and after delaying a while, he departed to the mercy of Allah. Thereupon his 3 sons got ready the funeral gear and whatever was suited to his estate for the mortuary obsequies, such as cerements and other matters. They washed the corpse and enshrouded it and prayed over it. Then, having committed it to the earth, they returned to their palaces, where the wazirs and the lords of the land, and the city folk in their multitudes, high and low, rich and poor, flocked to condole with them on the loss of their father. And the news of his decease was soon bruited abroad in all the provinces, and deputations from each and every city came to offer condolence to the king's sons. These ceremonies duly ended, the eldest prince demanded that he should be seated as Sultan on the stead of his sire in accordance with the paternal will and testament. But he could not obtain it from his 2 brothers, as both and each said, I will become ruler in room of my father. So enmity and disputes for the government now arose among them, and it was not to be won by any. But at last quoth the eldest prince, Wend we, and submit ourselves to the arbitration of a sultan of the tributary sultans, and let him to whom he shall adjudge the realm take it and reign over it. Quoth they, 'Tis well, and thereto agreed, as did also the wazirs, and the 3 set out without suite, seeking a sultan of the sultans who had been under the hands of their sire, in order that they might take him to arbitrator. And they stinted, not faring till the middle way, when behold, they came upon a mead abounding in herbage, and in rainwater lying sheeted. So they sat them down to rest, and to eat of their victual, when one of the brothers, casting his eye upon the herbage, cried, Verily, a camel hath lately passed this way, laden half with halwa sweetmeats, and half with hamiz pickles. True, cried the second, and he was blind of an eye. Hardly, however, had they ended their words, when lo, the owner of the camel came upon them, for he had overheard their speech, and had said to himself, By Allah, these 3 fellows have driven off my property, inasmuch as they have described the burden, and eke the beast as one-eyed. And cried out, Ye 3 have carried away my camel. By Allah, we have not seen him, quoth the princes, much less have we touched him. But quoth the man, By the Almighty, who can have taken him except you? And if you will not deliver him to me, off with us, I and you 3, to the Sultan. They replied, By all manner of means let us wend to the sovereign. So the 4 hied forth, the 3 princes and the cameleer, and ceased not faring till they reached the capital of the king, where they took seat without the wall to rest for an hour's time, and presently they arose and pushed into the city and came to the royal palace. Then they craved leave of the chamberlains, and one of the eunuchs caused them enter, and signified to the sovereign that the 3 sons of such and such a sultan had made act of presence. So he bade them be set before him, and the 4 went in, and saluted him, and prayed for him, and he returned their salams. He then asked them, "What is it hath brought you hither, and what may ye want in way of inquiry?" Now the first to speak was the cameleer, and he said, "O my lord the Sultan, verily these 3 men have carried off my camel, by proof of their own speech, for they have indeed described him and the burden he bore. And I require of our lord the Sultan that he take from these wights and deliver to me the camel, which is mine, as proved by their own words." Presently asked the Sultan, "What say ye to the claims of this man, and the camel belonging to him?" Hereto the princes made answer, "By Allah, O King of the Age, we have not seen the camel, much less have we stolen him." Thereupon the cameleer exclaimed, "O my lord, I heard yonder one say that the beast was blind of an eye, and the second said that half his load was of sour stuff, and the other half was of sweet stuff." They replied, "True, we spake these words." And the Sultan cried to them, "Ye have purloined the beast by this proof." They rejoined, "No, by Allah, O my lord, we sat us in such a place for repose and refreshment, and we remarked that some of the pasture had been grazed down. So we said, this is the grazing of a camel, and he must have been blind of one eye, as the grass was eaten only on one side. But as for our saying that the load was half halwa sweetmeats and half hamiz pickles, we saw on the place where the camel had knelt the flies gathering in great numbers, while on the other were none. So the case was clear to us, as flies settle on naught save the sugared, that one of the panniers must have contained sweets, and the other sours." Hearing this, the Sultan said to the cameleer, "O man, fare thee forth, and look after thy camel, for these signs and tokens prove not the theft of these men, but only the power of their intellect and their penetration." And when the cameleer heard this, he went his ways. Presently the Sultan cleared a place in the palace, and allotted to it the princes for their entertainment. He also directed that they be supplied with a banquet, and the eunuchs did his bidding. But when it was eventide, and the supper was served up, the trio sat down to it, purposing to eat. The cadet, tasting a bit of kid, exclaimed, "This kid was suckled by a dog." And the youngest exclaimed, "Assuredly, this Sultan must be of ignoble birth." And this was said by the youths, what while the Sultan had hidden himself, in order to hear and to profit by the prince's words. So he waxed wroth, and entered hastily, crying, "What be these speeches ye have spoken?" They replied, "Concerning what thou hast heard, inquire within, and thou wilt find it wholly true." The Sultan then went forth and summoned the head shepherd, and asked him concerning the kid he had butchered. He replied, "By Allah, O my lord, the nanny goat that bare the kid died, and we found none other in milk to suckle him. But I had a dog that had just pupped, and her have I made nourish him." The Sultan lastly hent his sword in hand, and proceeded to the apartments of the Sultana mother, and cried, "By Allah, unless thou avert my shame, we will cut thee down with this scimitar. Say me whose son I am." She replied, "By Allah, O my child, indeed falsehood is an excuse, but fact and truth are more saving and superior. Verily thou art the son of a cook. Thy sire could not obtain boy children, and I bare him only a single daughter. But it so fortuned that the kitchener's wife lay in of a boy, to wit thyself. So we gave my girl babe to the cook, and took thee as son of the Sultan, dreading for the realm after thy sire's death." The king went forth from his mother in astonishment at the penetration of the youths, and when he had taken seat in his palace, he summoned the trio, and as soon as they appeared he asked them, "Which of you was it that said of the kid's meat that the beast was suckled by a dog? What proof had he of this? How did he learn it, and whence did his intelligence discover it to him?" Now when the deceased Sultan's second son heard these words, he made answer, "I, O King of the Age, am he who said that say." The king replied, "'Tis well." And the prince resumed, O my lord, that which showed me the matter of the meat which was to us brought is as follows. I found the fat of the kid all near the bone, and I knew that the beast had sucked dog's milk, for the flesh of dogs lieth outside, and their fat is on their bones, whereas in sheep and goats the fat lieth upon the meat. Such then was my proof wherein there is no doubt nor hesitation. And when thou shalt have made question and inquiry, thou wilt find this to be fact. Quoth the Sultan, "'Tis well, thou hast spoken truth, and whatso thou sayest is soothfast. But which is he who declared that I am ignoble, and what was his proof, and what sign in me exposed it to him?" Quoth the youngest prince, "I am he who said it." And the Sultan rejoined, "There is no help but that thou provide me with a proof." The prince rejoined, "O my lord, I have evidence that thou art the son of a cook, and a base born, and that thou didst not sit at meat with us, and this was mine all sufficient evidence. Every man hath three properties, which he inheriteth at times from his father, at times from his maternal uncle, and at times from his mother. From his sire cometh generosity or niggardness, from his uncle courage or cowardice, from his mother modesty or immodesty, and such is the proof of every man." Then to him quoth the Sultan, "Sooth thou speakest. But say me, men who, like you, know all things thoroughly by evidence and by your powers of penetration, what cause have they to come seeking arbitration at my hand? Beyond yours there be no increase of intelligence. So fare ye forth from me, and manage your matter among yourselves. For 'tis made palpable to me by your own words, that naught remaineth to you save to speak of mysterious subjects. Nor have I the capacity to adjudge between you after that which I have heard from you. In fine, an ye possess any document drawn up by your sire before his decease, act according to it, and contrary it not." Upon this the princes went forth from him, and made for their own country and city, and did as their father had bidden them do on his deathbed. The eldest enthroned himself as Sultan, the cadet assumed possession and management of the moneys and treasures, and the youngest took to himself the camels and the horses, and the beeves and the muttons. Then each and every was indeed equal with his co-partner in the gathering of good. The Jar of Olives and the Boy Kazi, from the 1001 Nights, translated from the Arabic by Sir Richard and Lady Isabel Burton. Under the reign of the Caliph Harun al-Rashid, there dwelt in the city of Baghdad a certain merchant, Ali Khwaja Hight, who had a small stock of goods wherewith he bought and sold and made a bare livelihood, abiding alone and without a family in the house of his forebears. Now so it came to pass that each night for 3 nights together he saw in vision a venerable sheikh, who bespake him thus: "Thou art beholden to make a pilgrimage to Mecca. Why abidest thou sunk in heedless slumber, and farest not forth as it behooveth thee?" Hearing these words he became sore startled and affrighted, so that he sold shop and goods and all that he had, and, with firm intent to visit the holy house of Almighty Allah, he let his home on hire, and joined a caravan that was journeying to Mecca the Magnified. But ere he left his natal city, he placed 1,000 gold pieces, which were over and above his need for the journey, within an earthen jar filled up with asafari or sparrow olives, and having made fast the mouth thereof, he carried the jar to a merchant friend of many years' standing, and said, "Belike, thou hast heard tell that I purpose going with a caravan on pilgrimage to Mecca, the holy city. So I have brought a jar of olives, the which, I pray thee, preserve for me in trust against my return." The merchant at once arose, and handing the key of his warehouse to Ali Khwaja, said, "Here, take the key, and open the store, and therein place the jar anywhere thou choosest, and when thou shalt come back, thou wilt find it even as thou leftest it." Hereupon Ali Khwaja did his friend's bidding, and locking up the door, returned the key to its master. Then loading his traveling goods upon a dromedary, and mounting a second beast, he fared forth with the caravan. They came at length to Mecca the Magnified, and it was the month of Zu al Hijjah, wherein myriads of Moslems hie hither on pilgrimage, and pray and prostrate before the Ka'abah temple. And when he had circuited the holy house, and fulfilled all the rites and ceremonies required of palmers, he set up a shop for sale of merchandise. By chance, two merchants passing along the street espied the fine stuffs and goods in Ali Khwajah's booth, and approved much of them, and praised their beauty and excellence. Presently quoth one to other, "This man bringeth here most rare and costly goods." Now in Cairo, the capital of Egypt land, he would get full value for them, and far more than in the markets of this city. Hearing mention of Cairo, Ali Khwajah conceived a sore longing to visit that famous capital. So he gave up his intent to return Baghdad-ward, and purposed wayfaring to Egypt. Accordingly he joined a caravan, and arriving thither was well pleased with the place, both country and city, and selling his merchandise he made great gain therefrom. Then, buying other goods and stuffs, he purposed to make Damascus. But for 1 full month he tarried at Cairo, and visited her sanctuaries and saintly places, and after leaving her walls, he solaced himself with seeing many famous cities distant several days' journey from the capital along the banks of the river Nilus. Presently, bidding adieu to Egypt, he arrived at the sanctified house, Jerusalem, and prayed in the temple of Banu Israel, which the Moslems had re-edified. In due time he reached Damascus, and observed that the city was well builded and much peopled, and that the fields and meads were well watered with springs and channels, and that the gardens and the vergiers were laden with flowers and fruits. Amid such delights Ali Khwajah hardly thought of Baghdad. Withal he ceased not to pursue his journey through Aleppo, Mosul, and Shiraz, tarrying some time at all of these towns, especially at Shiraz, till at length, after 7 years of wayfaring, he came back to Baghdad. For 7 long years the Baghdad merchant never once thought of Ali Khwajah, or of the trust committed to his charge, till one day, as his wife sat at meat with him at the evening meal, their talk by chance was of olives. Quoth she to him, "I would now fain have some, that I may eat of them." And quoth he, "As thou speakest thereof, I bethink me of that Ali Khwajah, who 7 years ago fared on a pilgrimage to Mecca, and ere he went left in trust with me a jar of sparrow olives, which still cumbereth the storehouse. Who knoweth where he is, or what hath betided him? A man who lately returned with the Hajj caravan brought me word that Ali Khwajah had quitted Mecca the Magnified with intent to journey on to Egypt. Allah Almighty alone knoweth, and he be still alive, or he be now dead. However, if his olives be in good condition, I will go bring some hither, that we may taste them. So give me a platter and a lamp, that I may fetch thee somewhat of them." His wife, an honest woman and an upright, made answer, "Allah forbid that thou shouldst do a deed so base and break thy word and covenant. Who can tell? Thou art not assured by any of his death. Perchance he may come back from Egypt safe and sound tomorrow or the day after. Then wilt thou, and thou cannot deliver unharmed to him what he hath left in pledge, be ashamed of this thy broken troth? And we shall be disgraced before man and dishonored in the presence of thy friend. I will not for my part have any hand in such meanness, nor will I taste the olives. Furthermore, it standeth not to reason that after 7 years keeping they should be fit to eat. I do implore thee to forswear this ill purpose." On such wise the merchant's wife protested, and prayed her husband that he meddle not with Ali Khwajah's olives, and shamed him of his intent, so that for the nonce he cast the matter from his mind. However, although the trader refrained that evening from taking Ali Khwajah's olives, yet he kept the design in memory, until one day, when, of his obstinacy and unfaith, he resolved to carry out his project, and rising up, walked toward the storeroom, dish in hand. By chance he met his wife, who said, "I am no partner with thee in this ill action. In very truth some evil shall befall thee an thou do such deed." He heard her, but heeded her not, and going to the storeroom, opened the jar, and found the olives spoiled and white with mould. But presently he tilted up the jar, and pouring some of its contents into the dish, suddenly saw an Ashrafi fall from the vessel, together with the fruit. Then, filled with greed, he turned out all that was within into another jar, and wondered with exceeding wonder to find the lower half full of golden coins. Presently, putting up the monies and the olives, he closed the vessel, and going back, said to his wife, "Thou spakest sooth, for I have examined the jar, and found the fruit mouldy and foul of smell. Wherefore I returned it to its place, and left it as it was aforetime." That night the merchant could not sleep a wink for thinking of the gold, and how he might lay hands thereon. And when morning morrowed, he took out all the Ashrafis, and buying some fresh olives in the bazaar, filled up the jar with them, and closed the mouth, and set it in its usual place. Now it came to pass, by Allah's mercy, that at the end of the month Ali Khwajah returned safe and sound to Baghdad. And he first went to his old friend, to wit the merchant, who greeted him with feigned joy, fell on his neck, but withal was sore troubled and perplexed at what might happen. After salutations and much rejoicing on either part, Ali Khwajah bespake the merchant on business, and begged that he might take back his jar of Asafari olives, which he had placed in charge of his familiar. Quoth the merchant to Ali Khwajah, "O my friend, I wot not where thou didst leave the jar of olives, but here is the key. Go down to the storehouse, and take all that is thine own." So Ali Khwajah did as he was bidden, and carrying the jar from the magazine, took his leave and hastened home. But when he opened the vessel, and found not the gold coins, he was distracted and overwhelmed with grief, and made bitter lamentation. Then he returned to the merchant, and said, "O my friend, Allah, the All-Present and the All-Seeing, be my witness, that when I went on my pilgrimage to Mecca the Magnified, I left 1,000 Ashrafis in that jar, and now I find them not. Canst thou tell me aught concerning them? And thou in thy sore need have made use of them? It mattereth not, so thou wilt give them back as soon as thou art able?" The merchant, apparently pitying him, said, "O good my friend, thou didst thyself with thine hand set the jar inside the storeroom. I wist not that thou hadst aught in it save olives. Yet as thou didst leave it, so in like manner didst thou find it, and carry it away. And now thou chargest me with theft of Ashrafis. It seemeth strange, and passing strange, that thou shouldst make such accusation. When thou wentest, thou madest no mention of any money in the jar, but saidst that it was full of olives, even as thou hast found it. Had thou left gold coins therein, then surely thou wouldst have recovered them." Hereupon Ali Khwajah begged hard with much entreaty, saying, "Those 1,000 Ashrafis were all I owned, the money earned by years of toil. I do beseech thee have pity on my case, and give them back to me." Replied the merchant, waxing wroth with great wrath, "O my friend, a fine fellow thou art, to talk of honesty, and withal make such false and lying charge. Begone! Hie thee hence, and come not to my house again, for now I know thee as thou art, a swindler and impostor." Hearing this dispute between Ali Khwajah and the merchant, all the people of the quarter came crowding to the shop, and thus it became well known to all, rich and poor, within the city of Baghdad, how that one Ali Khwajah had hidden 1,000 Ashrafis within a jar of olives, and had placed it on trust with a certain merchant. Moreover, how, after pilgrimage to Mecca, and 7 years of travel, the poor man had returned, and that the rich man had gainsaid his words anent the gold, and was ready to make oath that he had not received any trust of the kind. At length, when naught else availed, Ali Khwajah was constrained to bring the matter before the Kazi, and to claim 1,000 Ashrafis of his false friend. The judge asked, "What witnesses hast thou who may speak for thee?" And the plaintiff answered, "O my lord the Kazi, I feared to tell the matter to any man, lest all come to know of my secret. Allah Almighty is my sole testimony." This merchant was my friend, and I recked not that he would prove dishonest and unfaithful." Quoth the judge, "Then must I needs send for the merchant, and hear what he saith on oath." And when the defendant came, they made him swear by all he deemed holy, facing Ka'abah wards, with hands uplifted. And he cried, "I swear that I know naught of any Ashrafis belonging to Ali Khwajah." Hereat the Kazi pronounced him innocent and dismissed him from court, and Ali Khwajah went home sad at heart and said to himself, "Alas, what justice is this which hath been meted out to me, that I should lose my money and my just cause be deemed unjust? It hath been truly said, he loseth the lave who sueth before a knave." On the next day he drew out a statement of his case, and as the Caliph Harun al-Rashid was on his way to Friday prayers, he fell down on the ground before him and presented to him the paper. The commander of the faithful read the petition, and having understood the case, deigned give order, saying, "Tomorrow bring the accuser and the accused to the audience hall, and place the petition before my presence, for I myself will inquire into this matter." That night the Prince of True Believers, as was his wont, donned disguise to walk about the squares of Baghdad and its streets and lanes, and accompanied by Ja'afar the Barmaki and Masrur the sworder of his vengeance, proceeded to espy what happened in the city. Immediately on issuing forth he came upon an open place in the bazaar, when he heard the hubbub of children a playing, and saw at scanty distance some 10 or dozen boys making sport among themselves in the moonlight, and he stopped a while to watch their diversion. Then one among the lads, a goodly and a fair complexioned, said to the others, "Come now, and let us play the game of Kazi. I will be the judge. Let one of you be Ali Khwajah, and another the merchant with whom he placed the 1,000 Ashrafis in pledge before faring on his pilgrimage. So come ye before me, and let each one plead his plea." When the Caliph heard the name of Ali Khwajah, he minded him of the petition which had been presented to him for justice against the merchant, and bethought him that he would wait and see how the boy would perform the part of Kazi in their game, and upon what decision he would decide. So the Prince watched the mock trial with keen interest, saying to himself, "This case hath verily made such stir within the city, that even the children know thereof, and react it in their sports." Presently he among the lads who took the part of Ali Khwajah, the plaintiff, and his playmate who represented the merchant of Baghdad, accused of theft, advanced and stood before the boy who as the Kazi sat in pomp and dignity. Quoth the judge, "O Ali Khwajah, what is thy claim against this merchant?" And the complainant preferred his charge in a plea of full detail. Then said the Kazi to the boy who acted merchant, "What answerest thou to this complaint, and why didst thou not return the gold pieces?" The accused made reply even as the real defendant had done, and denied the charge before the judge, professing himself ready to take oath thereto. Then said the boy Kazi, "Ere thou swear on oath that thou hast not taken the money, I would fain see for myself the jar of olives which the plaintiff deposited with thee on trust." Then turning to the boy who represented Ali Khwajah, he cried, "Go thou, and instantly produce the jar, that I may inspect it." And when the vessel was brought, the Kazi said to the two contentious, "See now, and say me, be this the very jar which thou, the plaintiff, leftest with the defendant?" And both answered that it was one and the same. Then said the self-constituted judge, "Open now the jar, and bring hither some of the contents, that I may see the state in which the Asafari olives actually are." Then tasting of the fruit, "How is this? I find their flavor is fresh and their state excellent. Surely during the lapse of 7 12 months the olives would have become moldy and rotten. Bring now before me 2 oil merchants of the town, that they may pass opinion upon them." Then 2 other of the boys assumed the parts commanded, and coming into court stood before the Kazi, who asked, "Are ye olive merchants by trade?" They answered, "We are, and this hath been our calling for many generations, and in buying and selling olives we earn our daily bread." Then said the Kazi, "Tell me now, how long do olives keep fresh and well flavored?" And they said, "O my lord, however carefully we keep them, after the third year they change flavor and color and become no longer fit for food. In fact, they are good only to be cast away." Thereupon quoth the boy Kazi, "Examine me now these olives that are in this jar, and say me how old are they, and what is their condition and savor." The two boys who played the parts of oil merchants pretended to take some berries from the jar and taste them, and presently they said, "O our lord the Kazi, these olives are in fair condition and full flavored." Quoth the Kazi, "Ye speak falsely, for 'tis 7 years since Ali Khwaja put them in the jar, as he was about to go a pilgrimaging." And quoth they, "Say whatso thou wilt, those olives are of this year's growth, and there is not an oil merchant in all Baghdad but who will agree with us." Moreover, the accused was made to taste and smell the fruits, and he could not but admit that it was even so as they had avouched. Then said the boy Kazi to the boy defendant, "'Tis clear thou art a rogue and a rascal, and thou hast done a deed wherefore thou richly deservest the gibbet." Hearing this, the children frisked about and clapped their hands with glee and gladness. Then seizing hold of him who acted as the merchant of Baghdad, they led him off as to execution. The commander of the faithful, Harun al-Rashid, was greatly pleased at this acuteness of the boy who had assumed the part of the judge in the play, and commanded his Wazir Ja'afar, saying, "Mark well the lad who enacted the Kazi in this mock trial, and see that thou produce him on the morrow. He shall try the case in my presence, substantially and in real earnest, even as we have heard him deal with it in play. Summon also the Kazi of this city, that he may learn the administration of justice from this child. Moreover, send word to Ali Khwaja, bidding him bring with him the jar of olives, and have also in readiness 2 oil merchants of the town." Thus, as they walked along, the Caliph gave orders to the Wazir, and then returned to his palace. So on the morrow, Ja'afar the Barmaki went to that quarter of the town where the children had enacted the mock trial, and asked the schoolmaster where his scholars might be. And he answered, "They have all gone away, each to his home." So the minister visited the houses pointed out to him, and ordered the little ones to appear in his presence. Accordingly they were brought before him, when he said to them, "Who among you is he that yesternight acted the part of Kazi in play, and passed sentence in the case of Ali Khwaja?" The eldest of them replied, "'Twas I, O my lord the Wazir." And then he waxed pale, not knowing why the question was put. Cried the minister, "Come along with me. The commander of the faithful hath need of thee." At this the mother of the lad was sore afraid and wept. But Ja'afar comforted her and said, "O my lady, have no fear and trouble not thyself. Thy son will soon return to thee in safety, Inshallah, God willing, and methinks the Sultan will show much favor unto him." The woman's heart was heartened on hearing these words of the Wazir, and she joyfully dressed her boy in his best attire and sent him off with the Wazir, who led him by the hand to the Caliph's audience hall, and executed all the other commandments which had been issued by his liege lord. Then the commander of the faithful, having taken seat upon the throne of justice, set the boy upon a seat beside him, and as soon as the contending parties appeared before him, that is Ali Khwaja and the merchant of Baghdad, he commanded them to state each man his case, in presence of the child, who should adjudge the suit. So the two, plaintiff and defendant, recounted their contention before the boy in full detail. And when the accused stoutly denied the charge, and was about to swear on oath that what he said was true, with hands uplifted and facing Ka'abah wards, the child Kazi prevented him, saying, "Enough! Swear not on oath till thou art bidden, and first let the jar of olives be produced in court." Forthwith the jar was brought forward and placed before him, and the lad bade open it. Then tasting one, he gave also to 2 oil merchants, who had been summoned, that they might do likewise, and declare how old was the fruit, and whether its savor was good or bad. They did his bidding, and said, "The flavor of these olives hath not changed, and they are of this year's growth." Then said the boy, "Methinks ye are mistaken, for 7 years ago Ali Khwajah put the olives into the jar. How then could fruit of this year find their way therein?" But they replied, "'Tis even as we say, and thou believe not our words, send straightway for other oil merchants and make inquiry of them. So shalt thou know if we speak sooth or lies." But when the merchant of Baghdad saw that he could no longer avail to prove his innocence, he confessed everything, to wit, how he had taken out the Ashrafis and filled the jar with fresh olives. Hearing this, the boy said to the Prince of True Believers, "O gracious sovereign, last night in play we tried this cause, but thou alone hast power to apply the penalty. I have adjudged the matter in thy presence, and I humbly pray that thou punish this merchant according to the law of the Koran and the custom of the Apostle, and thou decree the restoring of his 1,000 gold pieces to Ali Khwajah, for that he hath been proved entitled to them."
Calamity Ahmad and Habsalam Bazaza from the Arabic. Caliph Harun al-Rashid went in to Kut al-Kulub, who rose to him on sighting him, and kissed the ground between his hands. When he said to her, "Hath Ala al-Din visited thee?" And she answered, "No, O Commander of the Faithful. I sent to bid him come, but he would not." So the Caliph bade carry her back to the Harim, and saying to Ala al-Din, "Do not absent thyself from us," returned to his palace. Accordingly, next morning, Ala al-Din mounted and rode to the Divan, where he took his seat as chief of the 60. Presently the Caliph ordered his treasurer to give the Wazir Ja'afar 10,000 dinars, and said, when his order was obeyed, "I charge thee to go down to the bazaar where handmaidens are sold, and buy Ala al-Din a slave girl with this sum." Accordingly, in obedience to the king, Ja'afar took Ala al-Din and went down with him to the bazaar. Now, as chance would have it that very day, the Emir Khalid, whom the Caliph had made governor of Baghdad, went down to the market to buy a slave girl for his son, and the cause of his going was that his wife, Khatun by name, had borne him a son called Habsalam Bazaza, and the same was foul of favor, and had reached the age of 20, without learning to mount horse, albeit his father was brave and bold, a doughty rider ready to plunge into the sea of darkness. And it happened that on a certain night his mother said to his father, "I want to find him a wife." Quoth Khalid, "The fellow is so foul of favor, and withal so sordid and beastly, that no woman would take him at a gift." And she answered, "We will buy him a slave girl." So it befell, for the accomplishing of what Allah Almighty had decreed, that on the same day Ja'afar and Ala al-Din, the governor Khalid and his son went down to the market. And behold, they saw in the hands of a broker a beautiful girl, lovely faced and of perfect shape. And the Wazir said to him, "O broker, ask her owner if he will take 1,000 dinars for her." And as the broker passed by the governor with the slave, Habsalam Bazaza cast at her one glance of the eyes, which entailed for himself 1,000 sighs. And he fell in love with her, and passion got hold of him, and he said, "O my father, buy me yonder slave girl." So the Emir called the broker, who brought the girl to him, and asked her her name. She replied, "My name is Jessamine." And he said to Habsalam Bazaza, "O my son, an she please thee, do thou bid higher for her." Then he asked the broker, "What hath been bidden for her?" And he replied, 1,000 dinars. Said the governor's son, "She is mine for 1,000 pieces of gold and one more." And the broker passed on to Ala al-Din, who bid 2,000 dinars for her. And as often as the Emir's son bid another dinar, Ala al-Din bid 1,000. The ugly youth was vexed at this, and said, O broker, who is it that outbiddeth me for the slave girl? Answered the broker, It is the Wazir Ja'afar, who is minded to buy her for Ala al-Din Abu al-Shamat. And Ala al-Din continued till he brought her price up to 10,000 dinars, and her owner was satisfied to sell her for that sum. Then he took the girl and said to her, I give thee thy freedom for the love of Almighty Allah, and forthwith wrote his contract of marriage with her and carried her to his house. Now when the broker returned, after having received his brokerage, the Emir's son summoned him and said to him, Where is the girl? Quoth he, She was bought for 10,000 dinars by Ala al-Din, who hath set her free and married her. At this the young man was greatly vexed and cast down, and sighing many a sigh, returned home, sick for love of the damsel. And he threw himself on his bed and refused food, for love and longing were sore upon him. Now when his mother saw him in this plight, she said to him, Heaven assain thee, O my son, what aileth thee? And he answered, Buy me jessamine, O my mother. Quoth she, When the flower seller passeth, I will buy thee a basket full of jessamine. Quoth he, It is not the jessamine one smells, but a slave girl named Jessamine, whom my father would not buy for me. So she said to her husband, Why and wherefore didst thou not buy him the girl? And he replied, What is fit for the Lord is not fit for the liege, and I have no power to take her. No less a man bought her than Ala al-Din, chief of the 60. Then the youth's weakness redoubled upon him, till he gave up sleeping and eating, and his mother bound her head with the fillets of mourning. And while in her sadness she sat at home, lamenting over her son, behold, came into her an old woman, known as the mother of Ahmad Kamakim, the arch thief, a knave who would bore through a middle wall and scale the tallest of the tall, and steal the very coal off the eyeball. From his earliest years he had been given to these malpractices, till they made him captain of the watch, when he stole a sum of money, and the chief of police, coming upon him in the act, carried him to the Caliph, who bade put him to death on the common execution ground. But he implored protection of the Wazir, whose intercession the Caliph never rejected. So he pleaded for him with the commander of the faithful, who said, How canst thou intercede for this pest of the human race? Ja'afar answered, O commander of the faithful, do thou imprison him. Whoso built the first jail was a sage, seeing that a jail is the grave of the living, and a joy for the foe. So the Caliph bade lay him in bilboes and write thereon, Appointed to remain here until death, and not to be loosed but on the corpse washer's bench. And they cast him fettered into limbo. Now his mother was a frequent visitor to the house of the Emir Khalid, who was governor and chief of police, and she used to go in to her son in jail and say to him, Did I not warn thee to turn from thy wicked ways? And he would always answer her, Allah decreed this to me, but, O my mother, when thou visitest the Emir's wife, make her intercede for me with her husband. So when the old woman came into the Lady Khatun, she found her bound with the fillets of mourning, and said to her, Wherefore dost thou mourn? She replied, For my son Habsalam Bazaza. And the old woman exclaimed, Heaven assain thy son, what hath befallen him? So the mother told her the whole story, and she said, What wouldst thou say of him who should achieve such a feat as would save thy son? Asked the lady, And what feat wilt thou do? Quoth the old woman, I have a son called Ahmad Kamakim, the arch thief, who lieth chained in jail, and on his bilboes is written, appointed to remain till death. So do thou don thy richest clothes, and trick thee out with thy finest jewels, and present thyself to thy husband with an open face and smiling mien, and say, By Allah, 'tis a strange thing, when a man desireth aught of his wife, he dunneth her till she doeth it. But if a wife desire aught of her husband, he will not grant it to her. Then he will say, What dost thou want? And do thou answer, First swear to grant my request. If he swear to thee by his head or by Allah, say to him, Swear to me the oath of divorce. And do not yield to him except he do this. And when he hath sworn to thee the oath of divorce, say to him, Thou keepest in prison a man called Ahmad Kamakim, and he hath a poor old mother, who hath set upon me, and who urgeth me in the matter, and who saith, Let thy husband intercede for him with the Caliph, that my son may repent, and thou gain heavenly guerdon. And the Lady Khatun replied, I hear and obey. So when her husband came in to his wife, she spoke to him as she had been taught, and made him swear the divorce oath and yield to her wishes. When morning dawned, after he had made the ghusl ablution and prayed the dawn prayer, he repaired to the prison and said, O Ahmad Kamakim, O thou arch thief, dost thou repent of thy works? Whereto he replied, I do indeed repent and turn to Allah and say with heart and tongue, I ask pardon of Allah. So the governor took him out of jail and carried him to court, he being still in bilboes, and approaching the Caliph, kissed ground before him. Quoth the king, O Emir Khalid, what seekest thou? Whereupon he brought forward Ahmad Kamakim, shuffling and tripping in his fetters, and the Caliph said to him, What, art thou yet alive, O Kamakim? He replied, O Commander of the Faithful, the miserable are long-lived. Quoth the Caliph to the Emir, Why hast thou brought him hither? And quoth he, O Commander of the Faithful, he hath a poor old mother cut off from the world, who hath none but this son, and she hath had recourse to thy slave, imploring him to intercede with thee to strike off his chains, for he repenteth of his evil courses, and to make him captain of the watch as before. The Caliph asked Ahmad Kamakim, Dost thou repent of thy sins? I do indeed repent me to Allah, O Commander of the Faithful, answered he. Whereupon the Caliph called for the blacksmith and made him strike off his irons on the corpse washer's bench. Moreover, he restored him to his former office and charged him to walk in the ways of godliness and righteousness. So he kissed the Caliph's hands, and being invested with the uniform of captain of the watch, he went forward whilst they made proclamation of his appointment. Now for a long time he abode in the exercise of his office, till one day his mother went in to the governor's wife, who said to her, Praised be Allah, who hath delivered thy son from prison and restored him to health and safety. But why dost thou not bid him contrive some trick to get the girl Jessamine for my son Habsalam Bazazah? That will I, answered she, and going out from her repaired to her son. She found him drunk with wine and said to him, O my son, no one caused thy release from jail but the wife of the governor, and she would have thee find some means to slay Ala al-Din Abu al-Shamat and get his slave girl Jessamine for her son Absalam Bazazah. He answered, That will be the easiest of things, and I must needs set about it this very night. Now this was the first night of the new month And it was the custom of the Caliph to spend that night with the Lady Zubaydah for the setting free of a slave girl or a Mameluke or something of the sort. Moreover, on such occasions he used to doff his royal habit, together with his rosary and dagger, sword, and royal signet, and set them all upon a chair in the sitting saloon. And he had also a gold lantern, adorned with 3 jewels strung on a wire of gold, by which he set great store, and he would commit all these things to the charge of the eunuchs, whilst he went into the Lady Zubaydah's apartment. So the arch-thief Ahmad Kamakim waited till midnight, when Canopus shone bright, and all creatures to sleep were dight, whilst the Creator veiled them with the veil of night. Then he took his drawn sword in his right hand, and his grappling hook in his left, and, repairing to the Caliph's sitting saloon, planted his scaling ladder, and cast his grapnel on to the side of the terrace roof. Then, raising the trap door, let himself down into the saloon, where he found the eunuchs asleep. He drugged them with hemp fumes, and taking the Caliph's dress, dagger, rosary, kerchief, signet ring, and the lantern whereupon were the pearls, returned whence he came, and betook himself to the house of Ala al-Din, who had that night celebrated his wedding festivities with Jessamine. So arch-thief Ahmad Kamakim climbed over into his saloon, and, raising one of the marble slabs from the sunken part of the floor, dug a hole under it, and laid the stolen things therein, all save the lantern, which he kept for himself. Then he plastered down the marble slab as it was before, and, returning whence he came, went back to his own house, saying, I will now tackle my drink, and set this lantern before me, and quaff the cup to its light. Now, as soon as it was dawn of day, the Caliph went out into the sitting chamber, and, seeing the eunuchs drugged with hemp, aroused them. Then he put his hand to the chair, and found neither dress, nor signet, nor rosary, nor dagger sword, nor kerchief, nor lantern. Whereat he was exceeding wroth, and, donning the dress of anger, which was a scarlet suit, sat down in the divan. So the Wazir Ja'afar came forward, and, kissing the ground before him, said, Allah avert all evil from the Commander of the Faithful. Answered the Caliph, O Wazir, the evil is passing great. Ja'afar asked, What has happened? So he told him what had occurred, and behold, the chief of police appeared with Ahmad Kamakim, the robber, at his stirrup, when he found the Commander of the Faithful sore enraged. As soon as the Caliph saw him, he said to him, O Emir Khalid, how goes Baghdad? And he answered, Safe and secure. Cried he, Thou liest. How so, O Prince of True Believers? Asked the Emir. So he told him the case, and added, I charge thee to bring me back all the stolen things. Replied the Emir, O Commander of the Faithful, the vinegar worm is of and in the vinegar, and no stranger can get at this place. But the Caliph said, Except thou bring me these things, I will put thee to death. Quoth he, Ere thou slay me, slay Ahmad Kamakim, for none should know the robber and the traitor but the captain of the watch. Then came forward Ahmad Kamakim, and said to the Caliph, Accept my intercession for the chief of police, and I will be responsible to thee for the thief, and will track his trail till I find him. But give me 2 qazis and 2 assessors, for he who did this thing feareth thee not, nor doth he fear the governor, nor any other. Answered the Caliph, Thou shalt have what thou wantest, but let search be made first in my palace, and then in those of the Wazir and the Chief of the 60. Rejoined Ahmad Kamakim, Thou sayest well, O Commander of the Faithful. Belike the man that did this ill deed be one who hath been reared in the king's household, or in that of one of his officers. Cried the Caliph, As my head liveth, whosoever shall have done the deed, I will assuredly put him to death, be it mine own son. Then Ahmad Kamakim received a written warrant to enter and perforce search the houses. So he went forth, taking in his hand a rod made of bronze and copper, iron and steel, of each 3 equal parts. He first searched the palace of the Caliph, then that of the Wazir Ja'afar, after which he went the round of the houses of the chamberlains and the viceroys, till he came to that of Ala al-Din. Now when the Chief of the 60 heard the clamor before his house, he left his wife Jessamine and went down, and opening the door, found the master of police without, in the midst of a tumultuous crowd. So he said, What is the matter, O Emir Khalid? Thereupon the chief told him the case, and Ala al-Din said, Enter my house and search it. The governor replied, Pardon, O my lord, thou art a man in whom trust is reposed, and Allah forfend that the trusty turn traitor. Quoth Ala al-Din, There is no help for it but that my house be searched. So the chief of police entered, attended by the Qazi and his assessors. Whereupon Ahmad Kamakim went straight to the depressed floor of the saloon, and came to the slab under which he had buried the stolen goods, and let the rod fall upon it with such violence that the marble broke in sunder, and behold, something glittered underneath. Then said he, Bismillah, in the name of Allah, Mashallah, whatso Allah willeth. By the blessing of our coming, a hoard hath been hit upon. Wait while we go down into this hiding place and see what is therein. So the Qazi and assessors looked into the hole, and finding there the stolen goods, drew up a statement of how they had discovered them in Ala al-Din's house, to which they set their seals. Then they bade seize upon Ala al-Din, and took his turban from his head, and officially registered all his monies and effects which were in the mansion. Meanwhile, arch-thief Ahmad Kamakim laid hands on Jessamine, and committed her to his mother, saying, Deliver her to Khatun, the governor's lady. So the old woman took her and carried her to the wife of the master of police. Now as soon as Habsalam Bazazah saw her, health and heart returned to him, and he arose without stay or delay, and joyed with exceeding joy, and would have drawn near her, but she plucked a dagger from her girdle and said, Keep off from me, or I will kill thee and kill myself after. With this the ugly youth's love-longing redoubled, and he sickened for yearning and unfulfilled desire, and, refusing food, returned to his pillow. Then said his mother to her, O wretch, how canst thou make me thus to sorrow for my son? Needs must I punish thee with torture? And as for Ala al-Din, he will assuredly be hanged. And I will die for love of him, answered Jessamine. Then the governor's wife arose and stripped her of her jewels and silken raiment, and clothing her in sackcloth, sent her down into the kitchen, and made her a scullery wench, saying, The reward for thy constancy shall be to break up firewood and peel onions and set fire under the cooking pots. Quoth she, I am willing to suffer all manner of hardships and servitude, but I will not suffer the sight of thy son. However, Allah inclined the hearts of the slave girls to her, and they used to do her service in the kitchen. Such was the case with Jessamine. But as regards Ala al-Din, they carried him, together with the stolen goods, to the divan where the Caliph still sat upon his throne. And behold, the king looked upon his effects and said, "Where did ye find them?" They replied, "In the very middle of the house belonging to Ala al-Din Abu al-Shamat." Whereat the Caliph was filled with wrath and took the things, but found not the lantern among them, and said, "O Ala al-Din, where is the lantern?" He answered, "I stole it not. I know naught of it. I never saw it. I can give no information about it." Said the Caliph, "O traitor, how cometh it that I brought thee near unto me, and thou hast cast me out afar, and I trusted in thee, and thou betrayest me?" And he commanded to hang him. So the chief of police took him and went down with him into the city, whilst the crier preceded them, proclaiming aloud and saying, "This is the reward and the least of the reward he shall receive who doth treason against the Caliphs of true belief." And the folk flocked to the place where the gallows stood. Thus far concerning him. But as regards Ahmad al-Danaf, Ala al-Din's adopted father, he was sitting making merry with his followers in a garden, and carousing and pleasuring, when lo, in came one of the water carriers of the divan, and kissing the hand of Ahmad al-Danaf, said to him, "O Captain Ahmad, O Danaf, thou sittest at thine ease with water flowing at thy feet, and thou knowest not what hath happened." Asked Ahmad, "What is it?" And the other answered, "They have gone down to the gallows with thy son Ala al-Din, adopted by a covenant before Allah." Quoth Ahmad, "What is the remedy here, O Hasan Shuman, and what sayest thou of this?" He replied, "Assuredly Ala al-Din is innocent, and this blame hath come to him from some one enemy." Quoth Ahmad, "What counselest thou?" And Hasan said, "We must rescue him, Inshallah." Then he went to the jail and said to the jailer, "Give us someone who deserveth death." So he gave him one that was likest of men to Ala al-Din Abu al-Shamat. And they covered his head and carried him to the place of execution between Ahmad al-Danaf and Ali al-Zaybak of Cairo. Now they had brought Ala al-Din to the gibbet to hang him, but Ahmad al-Danaf came forward and set his foot on that of the hangman, who said, "Give me room to do my duty." He replied, "O accursed, take this man and hang him in Ala al-Din's stead, for he is innocent, and we will ransom him with this fellow, even as Abraham ransomed Isaac with the ram." So the hangman seized the man and hanged him in lieu of Ala al-Din. Whereupon Ahmad and Ali took Ala al-Din and carried him to Ahmad's quarters, and when there, Ala al-Din turned to him and said, "O my sire and chief, Allah requite thee with the best of good." Quoth he, "O Ala al-Din, what is this deed thou hast done?" The mercy of Allah be on him who said, "Whoever trusteth thee, betray him not, even if thou be a traitor." Now the Caliph set thee in high place about him, and styled thee trusty and faithful. How then couldst thou deal thus with him and steal his goods? "By the most great name, O my father and chief," replied Ala al-Din, "I had no hand in this, nor did I such deed, nor know I who did it." Quoth Ahmad, "Of a surety none did this but a manifest enemy, and whoever doth aught shall be requited for his deed. But, O Ala al-Din, thou canst sojourn no longer in Baghdad, for kings, O my son, may not pass from one thing to another, and when they go in quest of a man, long is his travail." "Whither shall I go, O my chief?" asked Ala al-Din, and he answered, "O my son, I will bring thee to Alexandria, for 'tis a blessed place; its threshold is green and its sojourn is agreeable." And Ala al-Din rejoined, "I hear and I obey, O my chief." So Ahmad said to Hasan Shuman, "Be mindful, and when the Caliph asketh for me, say, he is gone touring about the provinces." Then, taking Ala al-Din, he went forth of Baghdad and stayed, not going till they came to the outlying vineyards and gardens, where they met two Jews of the Caliph's tax gatherers riding on mules. Quoth Ahmad al-Danaf to these, "Give me the blackmail." And quoth they, "Why should we pay thee blackmail?" Whereto he replied, "Because I am the watchman of this valley." So they gave him each 100 gold pieces, after which he slew them and took their mules, one of which he mounted, whilst Ala al-Din bestrode the other. Then they rode on till they came to the city of Ayas, and put up their beasts for the night at the Khan. And when morning dawned, Ala al-Din sold his own mule and committed that of Ahmad to the charge of the doorkeeper of the caravanserai, after which they took ship from Ayas port and sailed to Alexandria. Here they landed and walked up to the bazaar, and behold, there was a broker crying a shop, and a chamber behind it for 950 dinars. Upon this Ala al-Din bid 1,000, which the broker accepted, for the premises belonged to the treasury. And the seller handed over to him the keys, and the buyer opened the shop, and found the inner parlor furnished with carpets and cushions. Moreover, he found there a storeroom full of sails and masts, cordage, and seamen's chests, bags of beads and cowrie shells, stirrups, battle axes, maces, knives, scissors, and such matters, for the last owner of the shop had been a dealer in second-hand goods. So he took his seat in the shop, and Ahmad al-Danaf said to him, "O my son, the shop and the room and that which is therein are become thine. So tarry thou here and buy and sell, and repine not at thy lot, for Almighty Allah blesseth trade." After this he abode with him 3 days, and on the 4th he took leave of him, saying, "Abide here till I go back and bring thee the Caliph's pardon, and learn who hath played thee this trick." Then he shipped for Ayas, where he took the mule from the inn, and returning to Baghdad met Pestilence Hasan and his followers, to whom said he, "Hath the Caliph asked after me?" And he replied, "No, nor hast thou come to his thought." So he resumed his service about the Caliph's person, and set himself to sniff about for news of Ala al-Din's case, till one day he heard the Caliph say to the Wazir, "See, O Ja'afar, how Ala al-Din dealt with me." Replied the minister, "O Commander of the Faithful, thou hast requited him with hanging, and hath he not met with his reward?" Quoth he, "O Wazir, I have a mind to go down and see him hanging." And the Wazir answered, "Do what thou wilt, O Commander of the Faithful." So the Caliph, accomplained by Ja'afar, went down to the place of execution, and raising his eyes, saw the hanged man to be other than Ala al-Din Abu al-Shamat, surnamed the Trusty, and said, "O Wazir, this is not Ala al-Din." "How knowest thou that it is not he?" asked the minister, and the Caliph answered, "Ala al-Din was short, and this one is tall." Quoth Ja'afar, "Hanging stretcheth." Quoth the Caliph, "Ala al-Din was fair, and this one's hair is black." Said Ja'afar, "Knowest thou not, O Commander of the Faithful, that death is followed by blackness?" Then the Caliph bade take down the body from the gallows tree, and they found the names of the two Shaykhs, Abu Bakr and Omar, written on his heels, whereupon cried the Caliph, "O Wazir, Ala al-Din was a Sunnite, and this fellow is a rejecter, a Shia." He answered, "Glory be to Allah who knoweth the hidden things, while we know not whether this was Ala al-Din or other than he." Then the Caliph bade bury the body, and they buried it, and Ala al-Din was forgotten as though he never had been. Such was his case. But as regards Habsalam Bazaza, the Emir Khalid's son, he ceased not to languish for love and longing till he died, and they joined him to the dust. Now as for the young wife Jessamine, she gave birth to a boy child like unto the moon. And when her fellow slave girls said to her, "What wilt thou name him?" she answered, "Were his father well, he had named him, but now I will name him Aslan." Now it so came to pass that one day after 2 years, whilst his mother was busied with the service of the kitchen, the boy went out and, seeing the stairs, mounted to the guest chamber. And the Emir Khalid, who was sitting there, took him upon his lap and glorified his Lord for that which he had created and fashioned. Then, closely eyeing his face, the governor saw that he was the likest of all creatures to Ala al-Din Abu al-Shamat. Presently his mother Jessamine sought for him, and finding him not, mounted to the guest chamber, where she saw the Emir seated with the child playing in his lap, for Allah had inclined his heart to the boy. And when the child espied his mother, he would have thrown himself upon her, but the Emir held him tight to his bosom and said to Jessamine, "Come hither, O damsel." So she came to him, when said to her, "Whose son is this?" And she replied, "He is my son." "And who is his father?" asked the Emir. And she answered, "His father was Ala al-Din Abu al-Shamat, but now he is become thy son." Quoth Khalid, "In very sooth Ala al-Din was a traitor." Quoth she, "Allah deliver him from treason! The heavens forfend and forbid that the trustee should be a traitor." Then said he, "When this boy shall grow up and reach man's estate and say to thee, 'Who is my father?' do thou say to him, 'Thou art the son of the Emir Khalid, governor and chief of police.'" And she answered, "I hear and I obey." Then he adopted the boy and reared him with the goodliest rearing, and engaged for him a professor of law and religious science, and an expert pensman who taught him to read and write. So he read the Quran twice and learned it by heart, and he grew up saying to the Emir, "O my father." Moreover, the governor used to go down with him to the tilting ground and assemble horsemen and teach the lad the fashion of fight and fray, and the place to plant lance thrust and sabre stroke. So that by the time he was 14 years old, he became a valiant wight and accomplished knight, and gained the rank of Emir. Now it chanced one day that Aslan fell in with Ahmad Kamakim, the arch thief, and accompanied him as cup companion to the tavern. And behold, Ahmad took out the jeweled lantern he had stolen from the Caliph, and setting it before him, pledged the wine cup to its light, till he became drunken. So Aslan said to him, "O captain, give me this lantern." But he replied, "I cannot give it to thee." Asked Aslan, "Why not?" And Ahmad answered, "Because lives have been lost for it." "Whose life?" inquired Aslan, and Ahmad rejoined, "There came hither a man who was made chief of the 60. He was named Ala al-Din Abu al-Shamat, and he lost his life through this lantern." Quoth Aslan, "And what was that story, and what brought about his death?" Quoth Ahmad Kamakim, "Thou hadst an elder brother by name Habsalam Bazazah, and when he reached the age of 16 and was inclined for marriage, thy father would have bought him a slave girl named Jessamine." And he went on to tell him the whole story from first to last of Habsalam Bazazah's illness and what befell Ala al-Din in his innocence. When Aslan heard this, he said in thought, "Haply this slave girl was my mother Jessamine, and my father was none other than Ala al-Din Abu al-Shamat." So the boy went out from him sorrowful, and met Calamity Ahmad, who at sight of him exclaimed, "Glory be to him unto whom none is like!" Asked Hasan the Pestilence, "Whereat dost thou marvel, O my chief?" And Ahmad the Calamity replied, "At the make of yonder boy Aslan, for he is the likest of human creatures to Ala al-Din Abu al-Shamat." Then he called the lad and said to him, "O Aslan, what is thy mother's name?" To which he replied, "She is called the damsel Jessamine." And the other said, "Hark ye, Aslan, be of good cheer and keep thine eyes cool and clear, for thy father was none other than Ala al-Din Abu al-Shamat. But, O my son, go thou in to thy mother and question her of thy father." He said, "Hearkening and obedience," and going in to his mother, put the question, whereupon quoth she, "Thy sire is the Emir Khalid." "Not so," rejoined he, "my father was none other than Ala al-Din Abu al-Shamat." At this the mother wept and said, "Who acquainted thee with this, O my son?" And he answered, "Ahmad al-Danaf, captain of the guard." So she told him the whole story, saying, "O my son, the true hath prevailed and the false hath failed. Know that Ala al-Din Abu al-Shamat was indeed thy sire, but it was none save the Emir Khalid who reared thee and adopted thee as his son. And now, O my child, when thou seest Ahmad al-Danaf the captain, do thou say to him, I conjure thee by Allah, O my chief, take my blood revenge on the murderer of my father, Ala al-Din Abu al-Shamat." So he went out from his mother, and betaking himself to Calamity Ahmad, kissed his hand. Quoth the captain, "What aileth thee, O Aslan?" And quoth he, "Now I know for certain that my father was Ala al-Din Abu al-Shamat, and I would have thee take my blood revenge on his murderer." He asked, "And who was thy father's murderer?" Whereto Aslan answered, "Ahmad Kamakim, the arch thief." "Who told thee this?" inquired he. And Aslan rejoined, "I saw in his hand the jeweled lantern, which was lost with the rest of the Caliph's gear, and I said to him, 'Give me this lantern.' But he refused, saying, 'Lives have been lost on account of this,' and told me it was he who had broken into the palace and stolen the articles and deposited them in my father's house." Then said Ahmad al-Danaf, "When thou seest the Emir Khalid don his harness of war, say to him, Equip me like thyself, and take me with thee. Then do thou go forth and perform some feat of prowess before the Commander of the Faithful, and he will say to thee, Ask a boon of me, O Aslan, and do thou make answer, I ask of thee this boon, that thou take my blood revenge on my father's murderer. If he says, Thy father is yet alive and is the Emir Khalid, the chief of police, answer thou, My father was Ala al-Din Abu al-Shamat, and the Emir Khalid hath a claim upon me only as the foster father who adopted me. Then tell him all that passed between thee and Ahmad Kamakim, and say, O Prince of True Believers, order him to be searched, and I will bring the lantern forth from his bosom." Thereupon said Aslan to him, "I hear and obey," and returning to the Emir Khalid, found him making ready to repair to the Caliph's court, and said to him, "I would fain have thee arm and harness me like thyself, and take me with thee to the Divan." So he equipped him and carried him thither. Then the Caliph sallied forth of Baghdad with his troops, and they pitched tents and pavilions without the city. Whereupon the host divided into two parties, and forming ranks fell to playing polo, one striking the ball with the mal and another striking it back to him. Now there was among the troops a spy who had been hired to slay the Caliph. So he took the ball, and smiting it with the bat, drove it straight at the Caliph's face, when behold, Aslan fended it off, and catching it, drove it back at him who smote it, so that it struck him between the shoulders, and he fell to the ground. The Caliph exclaimed, "Allah bless thee, O Aslan!" and they all dismounted and sat on chairs. Then the Caliph bade them bring the smiter of the ball before him, and said, "Who tempted thee to do this thing, and art thou friend or foe?" Quoth he, "I am thy foe, and it was my purpose to kill thee." Asked the Caliph, "And wherefore? Art not a Moslem?" Replied the spy, "No, I am a rejecter." So the Caliph bade them put him to death, and said to Aslan, "Ask a boon of me." Quoth he, "I ask of thee this boon, that thou take my blood revenge on my father's murderer." He said, "Thy father is alive, and there he stands on his 2 feet." "And who is he?" asked Aslan. And the Caliph answered, "He is the Emir Khalid, chief of police." Rejoined Aslan, "O Commander of the Faithful, he is no father of mine save by right of fosterage. My father was none other than Ala al-Din Abu al-Shamat." "Then thy father was a traitor," cried the Caliph. "Allah forbid, O Commander of the Faithful," rejoined Aslan, "that the trusty should be a traitor. But how did he betray thee?" Quoth the Caliph, "He stole my habit and what was therewith." Aslan retorted, "O Commander of the Faithful, Allah forfend that my father should be a traitor. But, O my lord, when thy habit was lost and found, didst thou likewise recover the lantern which was stolen from thee?" Answered the Caliph, "We never got it back." And Aslan said, "I saw it in the hands of Ahmad Kamakim and begged it of him, but he refused to give it me, saying, 'Lives have been lost on account of this.' Then he told me of the sickness of Habsalam Bazaza, son of the Emir Khalid, by reason of his passion for the damsel Jessamine, and how he himself was released from bonds, and that it was he who stole the habit and the lamp. So do thou, O Commander of the Faithful, take my blood revenge from my father on him who murdered him." At once the Caliph cried, "Seize ye Ahmad Kamakim!" and they seized him, whereupon he asked, "Where be the captain Ahmad al-Danaf?" And when he was summoned, the Caliph bade him search Kamakim. So he put his hand into the thief's bosom and pulled out the lantern. Said the Caliph, "Come hither, thou traitor! Whence hadst thou this lantern?" And Kamakim replied, "I bought it, O Commander of the Faithful." The Caliph rejoined, "Where didst thou buy it?" Then they beat him till he owned that he had stolen the lantern, the habit, and the rest, and the Caliph said to him, "What moved thee to do this, O traitor, and ruin Ala al-Din Abu al-Shamat, the trusty and faithful?" Then he bade them lay hands on him and on the chief of police, But the chief said, O Commander of the Faithful, indeed I am unjustly treated. Thou badest me hang him, and I had no knowledge of this trick, for the plot was contrived between the old woman and Ahmad Kamakim and my wife. I crave thine intercession, O Aslan. So Aslan interceded for him with the Caliph, who said, What hath Allah done with this youngster's mother? Answered Khalid, She is with me. And the Caliph continued, I command that thou order thy wife to dress her in her own clothes and ornaments, and restore her to her former degree, a lady of rank. And do thou remove the seals from Ala al-Din's house, and give his son possession of his estate. I hear and obey, answered Khalid, and going forth gave the order to his wife, who clad Jessamine in her own apparel, whilst he himself removed the seals from Ala al-Din's house and gave Aslan the keys. Then said the Caliph, Ask a boon of me, O Aslan, and he replied, I beg of thee the boon to unite me with my father. Whereat the Caliph wept and said, Most like thy sire was he that was hanged and is dead. But by the life of my forefathers, whoso bringeth me the glad news that he is yet in the bondage of this life, I will give him all he seeketh. Then came forward Ahmad al-Danaf, and kissing the ground between his hands, said, Grant me indemnity, O Commander of the Faithful. Thou hast it, answered the Caliph. And Calamity Ahmad said, I give thee the good news that Ala al-Din Abu al-Shamat, the trusty, the faithful, is alive and well. Quoth the Caliph, What is this thou sayest? Quoth al-Danaf, As thy head liveth, I say sooth, for I ransomed him with another of those who deserved death, and carried him to Alexandria, where I opened for him a shop and set him up as dealer in second-hand goods. So they journeyed to Alexandria. They alighted without the city, and Ala al-Din hid the women in a cavern, whilst he went into Alexandria and fetched them outer clothing, wherewith he covered them. Then he carried them to his shop, and leaving them in the ben, walked forth to fetch them the morning meal. And behold, he met Calamity Ahmad, who chanced to be coming from Baghdad. He saw him in the street, and received him with open arms, saluting him and welcoming him, whereupon Ahmad al-Danaf gave him the good news of his son Aslan, and how he was now come to the age of 20. And Ala al-Din, in his turn, told the captain of the guard all that had befallen him from first to last, whereat he marveled with exceeding marvel. Then they brought him to his shop and sitting room, where they passed the night, and next day he sold his place of business and laid its price with other monies. Now Ahmad al-Danaf had told him that the Caliph sought him, but he said, I am bound first for Cairo, to salute my father and mother and the people of my house. So they all went to Cairo the God-guarded, and here they alighted in the street called Yellow, where stood the house of Shamat al-Din. Then Ala al-Din knocked at the door, and his mother said, Who is at the door, now that we have lost our beloved for evermore? He replied, 'Tis I, Ala al-Din. Whereupon they came down and embraced him. Then he sent his wives and baggage into the house, and entering himself with Ahmad al-Danaf, rested there 3 days, after which he was minded to set out for Baghdad. His father said, Abide with me, O my son. But he answered, I cannot bear to be parted from my child Aslan. So he took his father and mother and set forth for Baghdad. Now when they came there, Ahmad al-Danaf went into the Caliph and gave him the glad tidings of Ala al-Din's arrival, and told him his story. Whereupon the king went forth to greet him, taking the youth Aslan, and they met and embraced each other. Then the commander of the faithful summoned the arch thief Ahmad Kamakim and said to Ala al-Din, "Up and at thy foe." So he drew his sword and smote off Ahmad Kamakim's head. Presently the Caliph held festival for Ala al-Din, and summoning the Qazis and witnesses, wrote the contract and married him to the Princess Husn Maryam. Moreover, the Caliph made Aslan chief of the 60 and bestowed upon him and his father sumptuous dresses of honor, and they abode in the enjoyment of all joys and joyance of life till there came to them the destroyer of delights and the sunderer of societies. Told by the Constable. From the Arabic. Ye must know that a company, among whom was a friend of mine, once invited me to an entertainment. So I went with him, and when we came into his house and sat down on his couch, he said to me, "This is a blessed day and a day of gladness, and who is he that liveth to see the like of this day? I desire that thou practice with us and disapprove not our proceedings, for that thou hast been accustomed to fall in with those who offer this." I consented thereto, and their talk happened upon the like of this subject. Presently my friend, who had invited me, arose from among them and said to them, "Listen to me, and I will acquaint you with an adventure which happened to me. There was a certain person who used to visit me in my shop, and I knew him not, nor he knew me, nor ever in his life had he seen me. But he was wont, whenever he wanted a dirham or two, by way of loan, to come to me and ask me, without acquaintance or introduction between me and him, and I would give him what he required. I told none of him, and matters abode thus between us a long while, till he began a borrowing at a time 10 or 20 dirhams, more or less. One day, as I stood in my shop, behold, a woman suddenly came up to me and stopped before me, and she was a presence as she were the full moon rising from among the constellations, and the place was alight by her light. When I saw her, I fixed my eyes on her and stared in her face, and she fell to bespeaking me with soft voice. When I heard her words and the sweetness of her speech, I was drawn to her, and as soon as she saw that I longed for her, she did her errand, and promising me a meeting, went away, leaving my thoughts occupied with her and fire aflame in my heart. Accordingly I abode, perplexed and pondering my affair, the fire still burning in my heart, till the 3rd day, when she came again, and I could hardly credit her coming. When I saw her, I talked with her, and cajoled her, and courted her, and craved her favor with speech, and invited her to my house. But hearing all this, she only answered, "I will not go up into anyone's house." Quoth I will go with thee. And quoth she, "Arise and come with me." So I rose, and putting into my sleeve a kerchief, wherein was a fair sum of silver, and a considerable, followed the woman, who forewent me and ceased not walking till she brought me to a lane and to a door, which she bade me unlock. I refused, and she opened it, and led me into the vestibule. As soon as I had entered, she bolted the entrance door from within, and said to me, "Sit here till I go in to the slave girls, and cause them enter a place whence they shall not see me." "'Tis well," answered I, and sat down. Whereupon she entered, and was absent from me an eye twinkling, after which she returned to me without a veil, and straightway said, "Arise and enter in the name of Allah." So I arose and went in after her. Land we gave not over going till we reached a saloon. When I examined the place, I found it neither handsome nor pleasant, but desolate and dreadful, without symmetry or cleanliness. Indeed, it was loathsome to look upon, and there was in it a foul smell. After this inspection, I seated myself amiddlemost the saloon, misdoubting. And lo and behold, as I sat, there came down on me from the dais a body of 7 naked men, without other clothing than leather belts about their waists. One of them walked up to me and took my turban, while another seized my kerchief that was in my sleeve, with my money, and a third stripped me of my clothes. After which a fourth came and bound my hands behind my back with his belt. Then they all took me up, pinioned as I was, and casting me down, fell a-haling me toward a sinkhole that was there, and were about to cut my throat, when suddenly there came a violent knocking at the door. As they heard the raps, they were afraid, and their minds were diverted from me by affright. So the woman went out, and presently returning, said to them, Fear not, no harm shall betide you this day. 'Tis only your comrade who hath brought you your dinner. With this the newcomer entered, bringing with him a roasted lamb, and when he came in to them he asked, What is to do with you, that ye have tucked up sleeves and bag trousers? Replied they, This is a head of game we've caught. As he heard these words, he came up to me, and peering in my face, cried out and said, By Allah, this is my brother, the son of my mother and father. Allah! Allah! Then he loosed me from my pinion bounds and bussed my head, and behold, it was my friend who used to borrow silver of me. When I kissed his head, he kissed mine, and said, O my brother, be not affrighted. And he called for my clothes and coin, and restored all to me, nor was aught missing. Also he brought me a porcelain bowl full of sherbet of sugar, with lemons therein, and gave me to drink, and the company came and seated me at a table. So I ate with them, and he said to me, O my lord and my brother, now have bread and salt passed between us, and thou hast discovered our secret and our case, but secrets with the noble are safe. I replied, As I am a lawfully begotten child, and a well-born, I will not name aught of this, nor denounce you. They assured themselves of me by an oath. Then they brought me out, and I went my way, very hardly crediting but that I was of the dead. I lay ill in my house a whole month, after which I went to the Hammam, and coming out, opened my shop, and sat selling and buying, as was my wont, but saw no more of that man or that woman, till one day there stopped before my shop a young Turkoman, as he were the full moon, and he was a sheep merchant, and had with him a leathern bag, wherein was money, the price of sheep he had sold. He was followed by the woman, and when he stopped over against my shop, she stood by his side and cajoled him, and indeed he inclined to her with great inclination. As for me, I was dying of solicitude for him, and began casting furtive glances at him, and winked at him, till he chanced to look round, and saw me signing to him. Whereupon the woman gazed at me, and made a signal with her hand, and went away. The Turkoman followed her, and I deemed him dead without a doubt. Wherefore I feared with exceeding fear, and shut my shop. Then I journeyed for a year's space, and returning, opened my shop. Whereupon, behold, the woman as she walked by came up to me and said, This is none other than a great absence. I replied, I have been on a journey. And she asked, Why didst thou wink at the Turkoman? I answered, Allah forfend, I did not wink at him. Quoth she, Beware lest thou thwart me, and went away. A while after this a familiar of mine invited me to his house, and when I came to him, we ate and drank and chatted. Then he asked me, O my friend, hath there befallen thee aught of sore trouble in the length of thy life? Answered I, Tell me first, hath there befallen thee aught? He rejoined, Know that one day I espied a fair woman, so I followed her, and sued her to come home with me. Quoth she, I will not enter anyone's house but my own. So come thou to my home an thou wilt, and be it on such a day. Accordingly, on the appointed day her messenger came to me, proposing to carry me to her. And when he announced his purpose, I arose and went with him, till we arrived at a goodly house and a great door. He opened the door, and I entered, whereupon he bolted it behind me, and would have gone in. But I feared with exceeding fear, and foregoing him to the second door, whereby he had me enter, bolted it, and cried out at him, saying, By Allah, an thou open not to me, I will slay thee, for I am none of those whom thou canst readily cozen. What deemest thou of cozening? Verily, I am startled by the loneliness of the house, and the lack of any keeper at its door, for I see none appear. O my lord, this is a private door. Private or public, open to me. So he opened to me, and I went out, and had gone but a little way from the door, when I met a woman, who said to me, A long life was foreordained to thee, else hadst thou never come forth of yonder house. I asked, How so? And she answered, Inquire of thy friend such an one, naming thee, and he will acquaint thee with strange things. So Allah upon thee, O my friend, tell me what befell thee of wondrous and marvelous, for I have told thee what befell me. O my brother, I am bound by a solemn oath. O my friend, false thine oath, and tell me. Indeed, I dread the issue of this. But he urged me till I told him all, whereat he marveled. Then I went away from him, and abode a long while without further news. One day I met another of my friends, who said to me, A neighbor of mine hath invited me to hear singers, but I said, I will not foregather with anyone. However, he prevailed upon me, so we repaired to the place, and found there a person who came to meet us, and said, Bismillah. Then he pulled out a key and opened the door, whereupon we entered, and he locked the door after us. Quoth I, We are the first of the folk, but where be the singers' voices? He replied, They're within the house. This is but a private door, so be not amazed at the absence of the folk. My friend said to me, Behold, we are two, and what can they dare to do with us? Then he brought us into the house, and when we entered the saloon, we found it desolate exceedingly, and dreadful of aspect. Quoth my friend, We are fallen into a trap, but there is no majesty and there is no might save in Allah, the Glorious, the Great. And quoth I, May God never requite thee for me with good eye. Then we sat down on the edge of the dais, and suddenly I espied a closet beside me. So I peered into it, and my friend asked me, What seest thou? I see there wealth in store, and corpses of murdered men galore. Look. So he looked and cried, By Allah, we are down among the dead. And we fell a-weeping, I and he. As we were thus, behold, 4 men came in upon us, by the door at which we had entered, and they were naked, wearing only leather belts about their waists, and made for my friend. He ran at them, and dealing one of them a blow with his sword pommel, knocked him down, whereupon the other 3 rushed upon him. I seized the opportunity to escape while they were occupied with him, and espying a door by my side, slipped into it, and found myself in an underground room without issue, even a window. So I made sure of death, and said, There is no majesty and there is no might save in Allah, the Glorious, the Great I. Then I looked at the top of the vault, and saw in it a range of glaze and colored lunettes. So I clambered up for dear life till I reached the lunettes, and I out of my wits for fear. I made shift to remove the glass, and scrambling out through the setting, found behind them a wall, which I bestrode. Thence I saw folk walking in the street. So I cast myself down to the ground, and Allah Almighty preserved me. And when I reached the face of earth unhurt, the folk flocked round me, and I acquainted them with my adventure. Now, as destiny decreed, the chief of police was passing through the market street. So the people told him what was to do, and he made for the door and bade raise it off its hinges. We entered with a rush and found the thieves, as they had thrown my friend down and cut his throat. For they occupied not themselves with me, but said, "Whither shall yonder fellow wend? Verily he is in our grasp." So the Wali hent them with the hand and questioned them of their case, and they confessed against the woman and against their associates in Cairo. Then he took them and went forth, after he had locked up the house and sealed it. And I accompanied him till he came without the first house. He found the door bolted from within, so he bade raise it, and we entered and found another door. This also he caused pull up, enjoining his men to silence till the door should be lifted. And we entered, and found the band occupied with new game, whom the woman had just brought in, and whose throat they were about to cut. The chief released the man, and gave him back whatso the thieves had taken from him. And he laid hands on the woman and the rest, and took forth of the house a mint of money, with which they found the purse of the Turkoman sheep merchant. They at once nailed up the thieves against the house wall, while as for the woman, they wrapped her in one of her mantillas, and nailing her to a board, set her upon a camel, and went round about the town with her. Thus Allah raised their dwelling places, and did away from me that which I feared from them. All this befell while I looked on, had I saw not my friend who had saved me from them the first time, whereat I wondered to the utterest of wonderment. However, some days afterward he came up to me, and indeed he had renounced the world and donned a fakir's dress. And he saluted me and went away. Then he again began to pay me frequent visits, and I entered into conversation with him, and questioned him of the band, and how he came to escape, he alone of them all. He replied, "I left them from the day on which Allah the Most High delivered thee from them, for that they would not obey my say. So I swore I would no longer consort with them." Quoth I, "By Allah, I marvel at thee, for that assuredly thou wast the cause of my preservation." Quoth he, "The world is full of this sort, and we beseech the Almighty to send us safety, for that these wretches practice upon men with every kind of malpractice."
The Duel of the Two Sharpers from the 1001 Nights. There was once in the city of Baghdad a man hight Al-Marwazi, who was a sharper and ruined the folk with his rogueries, and he was renowned in all quarters for knavery. He went out one day carrying a load of small pebbles, and swore to himself that he would not return to his lodging till he had sold it at the price of raisins. Now there was in another city a second sharper hight Al-Razi, one of its worst, who went out the same day bearing a load of round stones, anent which he too had sworn to himself that he would not sell it but at the price of sun-dried figs. So the twain fared on with that which was by them, and ceased not going till they met in one of the khans, and one complained to other of what he had suffered on travel in quest of gain, and of the little demand for his wares. Now each of them had it in mind to cheat his fellow. So the man of Marv said to the man of Ray, "Wilt thou sell me that?" He said, "Yes." And the other continued, "And wilt thou buy that which is with me?" The man of Ray consented, So they agreed upon this, and each of them sold to his mate that which was with him in exchange for the others, after which they bade farewell, and both fared forth. As soon as the twain were out of sight, they examined their loads to see what was therein, and one of them found that he had a load of small pebbles, and the other that he had a load of round stones, whereupon each of them turned back in quest of his fellow. They met again in the khan, and laughing at each other, cancelled their bargain. Then they agreed to enter into partnership, and that all they had of money and other good should be in common share and share alike. Then quoth Al-Razi to Al-Marwazi, "Come with me to my city, for that 'tis nearer than thine." So he went with him, and when he arrived at his quarters, he said to his wife and household and neighbours, "This is my brother, who hath been absent in the land of Khorasan, and is come back." And he abode with him in all honour for a space of 3 days. On the 4th day Al-Razi said to him, "Know, O my brother, that I purpose to do something." The other asked, "What is it?" And the first answered, "I mean to feign myself dead, and do thou go to the bazaar and hire 2 porters and a bier. Then take me up and go about the streets and markets with my body and collect alms on my account." Note: Moslems are bound to see true believers decently buried, and the poor often beg alms for the funeral. End of note. Accordingly the Mar man repaired to the market, and fetching that which he sought, returned to the Rayman's house, where he found his fellow cast down in the entrance passage, with his beard tied and his eyes shut, and his complexion was paled and his limbs were loose. So he deemed him really dead, and shook him, but he spoke not. Then he took a knife and pricked his feet, but he budged not. Presently said Al-Razi, "What is this, O fool?" And said Al-Marwazi, "I deemed thou wast dead in very deed." Al-Razi cried, "Get thee to business and leave funning." So he took him up and went with him to the market, and collected alms for him that day till eventide, when he bore him back to his abode and waited till the morrow. Next morning he again took up the bier and walked round with it as before, in quest of charity. Presently the chief of police, who was of those who had given him alms on the previous day, met him. So he was angered and fell on the porters and beat them, and took the dead body, saying, "I will bury him and win reward in heaven." So his followers took him up, and carrying him to the police officer, fetched grave diggers, who dug him a grave. Then they brought him a shroud and perfumes, and fetched an old man of the quarter to wash him. So the Shaykh recited over him the appointed prayers, and laying him on the bench, washed him and shrouded him. When the dead man found himself alone, he sprang up as he were a Satan, and donning the corpse washer's dress, took the cups and water can and wrapped them up in the napkins. Then he clapped his shroud under his armpit and went out. The doorkeepers thought that he was the washer, and asked him, "Hast thou made an end of the washing, so we may acquaint the Emir?" The sharper answered, "Yes," and made off to his abode, where he found the Marman wooing his wife and saying to her, "By the life, thou wilt never again look upon his face, for the best reason that by this time he is buried. I myself escaped not from them but after toil and trouble, and if he speak, they will do him to death." Quoth she, "And what wouldst thou have of me?" And quoth he, "Be mine, for I am better than thy husband." Now when the Rayman heard this, he rushed in upon them, and when Al-Marwazi saw him, he wondered at him and said to him, "How didst thou make thine escape?" Accordingly he told him the trick he had played, and they abode talking of that which they had collected from the folk, and indeed they had gotten great store of money. Then said the man of Marw, In very sooth, mine absence hath been prolonged, and lief would I return to my own land. Al-Razi said, As thou willst. And the other rejoined, Let us divide the monies we have made, and do thou go with me to my home, so I may show thee my tricks and my works. Replied the man of Ray, Come tomorrow, and we will divide the coin. So the Marman went away, and the other turned to his wife and said to her, We have collected us great plenty of money, and the dog would fain take the half of it. But such thing shall never be, for my mind hath been changed against him since I heard him making love to thee. Now, therefore, I propose to play him a trick and enjoy all the money, and do thou not oppose me. She replied, 'Tis well. And he said to her, Tomorrow, at peep o' day, I will feign myself dead, and do thou cry aloud and tear thy hair, whereupon the folk will flock to me. Then lay me out and bury me, and when the folk are gone away from the grave, dig down to me and take me, and fear not for me, as I can abide without harm 2 days in the tomb niche. Whereto she made answer, Do e'en whatso thou wilt. Accordingly, when it was the dawn hour, she bound his beard, and spreading a veil over him, shrieked aloud, whereupon the people of the quarter flocked to her, men and women. Presently up came Al-Marwazi for the division of the money, and hearing the keening asked, What may be the news? Quoth they, Thy brother is dead. And quoth he in himself, The accursed fellow cozeneth me, so he may get all the coin for himself. But I will presently do with him what shall soon requicken him. Then he tore the bosom of his robe and bared his head, weeping and saying, Alas, my brother, ah! Alas, my chief, ah! Alas, my lord, ah! And he went in to the men, who rose and condoled with him. Then he accosted the Rayman's wife and said to her, How came his death to occur? Said she, I know nothing except that when I arose in the morning, I found him dead. Moreover, he questioned her of the money which was with her, but she cried, I have no knowledge of this and no tidings. So he sat down at his fellow sharper's head and said to him, Know, O Razi, that I will not leave thee till after 10 days with their nights, wherein I will wake and sleep by thy grave. So rise, and don't be a fool. But he answered him not, and the man of Marv drew his knife and fell to sticking it into the other's hands and feet, purposing to make him move. But he stirred not, and he presently grew weary of this, and determined that the sharper was really dead. However, he still had his suspicions, and said to himself, This fellow is falsing me, so he may enjoy all the money. Therewith he began to prepare the body for burial, and bought for it perfumes and whatso was needed. Then they brought him to the washing place, and Al-Marwazi came to him, and heating water till it boiled and bubbled and 1/3 of it was evaporated, fell to pouring it on his skin, so that it turned bright red and lively blue and was blistered. But he abode still motionless. Presently they wrapped him in the shroud and set him on the bier, which they took up, and bearing him to the burial place, placed him in the grave niche and filled in the earth, after which the folk dispersed. But the Marman and the widow abode by the tomb, weeping, and ceased not sitting till sundown, when the woman said to him, Come, let us hie us home, for this weeping will not profit us, nor will it restore the dead. He replied to her, By Allah, I will not budge hence till I have slept and waked by this tomb 10 days with their nights. When she heard this his speech, she feared lest he should keep his word and his oath, and so her husband perish. But she said in her mind, This one dissembleth, and I leave him and return to my house, he will tarry by him a little while and go away. And Al-Marwazi said to her, Arise thou and hie thee home. So she arose and repaired to her house, while the man of Marw abode in his place till the night was half spent, when he said to himself, How long? Yet how can I let this knavish dog die and lose the money? Better I open the tomb on him and bring him forth and take my due of him by dint of grievous beating and torment. Accordingly he dug him up and pulled him forth of the grave, after which he betook himself to a garden hard by the burial ground and cut thence staves and palm fronds. Then he tied the dead man's legs and laid on to him with a staff and beat him a grievous beating. But the body never budged. When the time grew longsome on him, his shoulders became aweary, and he feared lest someone of the watch passing on his round should surprise and seize him. So he took up Al-Razi and carrying him forth to the cemetery, stayed not till he came to the Magyans' mortuary place, and casting him down in a tower of silence, rained heavy blows upon him till his shoulders failed him, but the other stirred not. Then he seated him by his side and rested, after which he rose and renewed the beating upon him, and thus he did till the end of the night, but without making him move. Now, as destiny decreed, a band of robbers, whose wont it was, when they had stolen anything, to resort to that place and there divide their loot, came thither in early dawn, according to their custom. They numbered 10, and they had with them much wealth, which they were carrying. When they approached the Tower of Silence, they heard a noise of blows within it, and their captain cried, This is a Magian whom the angels are tormenting. So they entered the cemetery, and as soon as they arrived over against him, the man of Marw feared lest they should be the watchmen come upon him. Therefore he fled and stood among the tombs. The robbers advanced to the place, and finding the man of Ray bound by the feet and by him some 70 sticks, wondered at this with exceeding wonder, and said, Allah confound thee! This was a miscreant, a man of many crimes, for earth has rejected him from her womb, and by my life he is yet fresh. This is his first night in the tomb, and the angels were tormenting him but now. So whoso of you hath a sin upon his soul, let him beat him, by way of offering to Almighty Allah. The robbers said, We be sinners one and all. So each of them went up to the corpse and dealt it about 100 blows, one saying the while, This is for my father, and another laid on to him, crying, This is for my grandfather, whilst the third muttered, This is for my brother, and a fourth exclaimed, This is for my mother. And they gave not taking turns at him, and beating him till they were weary, whilst Al-Marwazi stood laughing and saying in himself, 'Tis not I alone who have entered into default against him. There is no majesty and there is no might save in Allah, the glorious, the great. Then the robbers applied themselves to sharing their loot, wherein was a sword, which caused them to fall out anent the man who should take it. Quoth the captain, "'Tis my rede that we make proof of it, so an it be a fine blade, we shall know its worth, and if it be worthless, we shall know that." Whereto they said, "Try it on this corpse, for it is fresh." So the captain took the sword, and drawing it, brandished and made a false cut with it. But when the man of Ray saw this, he felt sure of death, and said in his mind, "I have borne the washing slab, and the boiling water, and the pricking with the knife point, and the grave niche, and its straightness, and all this, trusting in Allah that I might be delivered from death. And indeed I have been delivered. But the sword I may not suffer, seeing that one stroke of it will make me a dead man." So saying, he sprang to his feet, and seizing a thigh bone of one departed, shouted at the top of his voice, "O ye dead ones, take them to yourselves!" And he smote one of them, whilst his mate of Marv smote another, and they cried out at them, and buffeted them on their neck-napes, whereupon the robbers left that which was with them of loot, and ran away. And indeed their wits took flight for terror, and they ceased not running till they came forth of the Magian's mortuary ground, and left it a parsang's length behind them, when they halted, trembling and affrighted for the muchness of that which had befallen them of fear and awe of the dead. As for Al-Razi and Al-Marwazi, they made peace each with other, and sat down to share the spoil. Quoth the man of Marv, "I will not give thee a dirham of this money till thou pay me my due of the monies that be in thy house." And quoth the man of Ray, "I will do naught of the kind, nor will I withdraw this from aught of my due." So they fell out thereupon, and disputed each with other, and either of the twain went saying to his fellow, "I will not give thee a dirham." Wherefore words ran high between them, and the brawl was prolonged. Meanwhile, when the robbers halted, one of them said to the others, "Let us go back and see." And the captain said, "This thing is impossible of the dead. Never heard we that they came to life in such way. Return we and take our monies, for that the dead have no need of money." And they were divided in opinion as to returning. But presently one said, "Indeed our weapons are gone, and we may not prevail against them, and will not draw near the place. Only let one of us go look at it, and if he hear no sound of them, let him suggest to us what we shall do." At this they agreed that they should send a man of them, and assigned him for such mission 2 parts of the plunder. Accordingly he returned to the burial ground, and gave not over going till he stood at the door of the Tower of Silence, when he heard the words of Al-Marwazi to his fellow, "I will not give thee a single dirham of the money." The other said the same, and they were occupied with brawling and abuse and talk. So the robber returned in haste to his mates, who said, "What is behind thee?" Quoth he, "Get you gone and run for your lives, O fools, and save yourselves. Much people of the dead are come to life, and between them are words and brawls." Hereat the robbers fled, whilst the 2 sharpers returned to the man of Ray's house, and made peace, and added the robbers' spoil to the monies they had gained, and lived a length of time.